Welcome back, boys and girls, to the eastern wing of the Stinkbug Works. I'm going to guess that there's a high percentage of viewers that really haven't built a wood-framed model before. It's so easy to go out and get a really nice, ready-to-run boat that, a lot of people just don't build kits anymore. And this kit, quite frankly, is from the 1950s, and it's really crude. So I thought I would walk you through this whole thing. What I've done since I last talked to you is I made this nice little box out of aluminum foil, and what I do is I throw a bunch of parts in there, mix up some epoxy, and pour epoxy all over everything, and then with gloved hands and a paintbrush, I grab a part and I paint the hell out of it, and I grab a part and I paint the hell out of it, and then once everything's painted, I take it out and I wipe it down with a paper towel. What I really want to do is get epoxy in all these edges, because that's where water goes. Water goes where it can find a place. So before you start gluing this thing up, make sure there aren't places for water to go. Then they come out looking like this, and you sand them and they look like that. Then you start gluing them together. Now, here's the real problem. In fact, I'd even tacked you can see where I had some epoxy there. I'd even tacked the transom on there, but because these gaps are so big and the wood so small, you don't really get a good glue joint. And on the transom, if you can see, these notches for these shears have you twisting the shear just a little bit. So as this thing's pinned down to the board, I really don't want to twist the shear, so I had just tacked these two spots here. Now, my next goal was to come through and see, I have more parts over here that need the epoxy bath. So I'm going to do an epoxy bath today. And my plan is I'm going to leave this on the bench. I'll do the epoxy bath and I'll paint and I'll brush, but they're just going to go off and dry. I'm going to take some of that epoxy and mix it with shredded fiberglass and maybe some Cabosil to where it's kind of the consistency of toothpaste, maybe a little thicker, maybe the consistency of Vaseline, good car grease or something. And I'm going to fill up all these joints in here to where I get a good solid connection. And I'll even tack the back of the transom back on, but I won't glue the shears until the next gluing session. I use MKS L285 epoxy exclusively. I don't use anything else. Now, L285 is really good epoxy, and they know it, and they make you pay for it. It's not cheap, and the smallest unit you can buy is 1 gallon. Now, the epoxy itself has a real long shelf life. What doesn't have a long shelf life is the hardener. So you buy the hardener in smaller quantities, and you can buy a fast hardener or a slow hardener. And so I've been using that for years. It does slow down your project, where I could have this thing with 30-minute and 5-minute epoxy. I could have it done yesterday. It's glue it today, then tomorrow I can move it. Then glue tomorrow, and then a day later you can move it. And so it goes real slow, but I like the results. I mean, this is already all waterproofed, and you can barely tell. You can barely tell. You know, you can kind of see areas where I've got epoxy thin enough it'll shine, but for the most part, there's only enough epoxy on here to seal the wood. Well, that's a good thing. When you're building airplanes, you don't want a lot of epoxy weight. You don't build airplanes like this. Although, in the old days, I built model airplanes like this, and they were genuine die crushed. In fact, here, I'll relate another Dr. Jet story. I don't know if you remember Mark's Models, Mark Smith. And Mark's Models made some really good airplanes. They made his first kit. He was 16 years old when he kitted it, was the Windward. It was a glider, and it flew really well. It was my first RC airplane. It was a good flying airplane. Then he also built the Wind Free, which was essentially a modified Windward. It had the same wing area, just a much higher aspect ratio. And it was a good flyer, and he had a number of, gas-powered kits and so forth. And he also kitted the best flying airplane I have ever owned. And that was the Dave Thornburg designed Bird of Time. Let me tell you something. Dave's design theory on this one, design philosophy, was simple and light, and keep the wingtips even lighter. So he put at the time, modern airfoil on it, and it flew great. It was just a sweetheart. And then I'd put 1.5 pounds of lead in it, and it still flew like a sweetheart, only much faster. So Mark made die-crushed kits. Now, here's the deal. I was partners with Mark in a full-size glider, so I saw a lot of Mark and Mark's Models. And I remember his die crusher, and occasionally he'd have to replace the die crushing blades. And what a crude way to make kits. And you got kits that look like this. Yeah, you could build them, but the precision was lacking. On the Bird of Time, it was much better. Plus, I stack sanded everything and trued it all up. But anyway, building this just takes me back to that. So my plan today is I'm going to mix up epoxy, make a paste, fill these holes, use some of the unthickened epoxy to paint some of these parts. I'll be painting this little guy that goes here. I'll probably be painting, well, before I get to these stringers are going to run along here, and they're going to want to bend. I'm going to soak these in warm water and ammonia, pull them out, put them on the board, put a bend in them, let them dry, and then paint them with epoxy. And the same thing for the sides. If you look at the sides of the boat, this part right here curves around. So this gets a ride in a vat full of warm water and ammonia. You know, it sits in there for about half an hour, and you pull this stuff out, and it's like rubber, and you'll tape it into place, let it dry, paint it with epoxy, and then put it back on. Or maybe it'll be let it dry, you check it, it doesn't have enough curve, and you hold some curve in with a piece of tape, and you re-wet it and rebend it and so forth. But once it's bent to where you want it, then you can go ahead and epoxy coat it. The sides are further on down the line. The next thing will be the stringers and the bottom pieces. Voila. So there you go. We're moving along. I thought I would take you step by step because there's not a whole lot of wood-framed models out there anymore. So until next time, boys and girls, jet out.